In most animal species, evolution-selected behaviors tend to reduce the number of conflicts and mitigate their consequences. It is for this reason that strict hierarchies of dominance were consolidated. For example, among domestic chickens, after a series of fights, a peck order is generated that regulates access to food. Behaviors that reduce the probability of conflicts also developed among humans. And among these behaviors, there are those deriving from consolidated conformist tendencies. These tendencies were demonstrated by two classic psychosocial experiments. The experiment carried out in 1956 by Solomon Asch, in which 8 individuals participated, 7 of whom were aides of the investigator, a fact that the true subject of the test, the 8th person, ignored. The investigator showed them 3 lines of different length in descending order, and then another line of equal length to the first one. At that point, he asked the participants, starting with his aides, which of the 2 lines were equal. After a couple of normal repetitions of the test, in the 3rd series of questions, the aides began to answer in a concordant and manifestly wrong manner. The real subject of the experiment, who had to answer last or second to last, in a wide range of cases, also began to answer incorrectly, conforming to the wrong answer given by the persons who answered before him. The other experiment was conducted by Stanley Milgram in 1961, in which participants were informed that they were taking a test on memory and on the effects of learning. In the initial stage of the experiment, the investigator assigned the roles of student and teacher through a rigged draw. The unaware test subjects were always drawn as teachers, while an aide to the investigator was always drawn as the student. The teacher was placed in front of the electrical control panel of an electric current generator consisting of 30 switches, and his tasks were specified. He had to subject the student to a mnemonic test, namely to decide whether the answer given by the student was correct, and if it was wrong, inflict an electric shock, increasing the intensity at each error of the student, who was tied to an electric chair that was connected to the current generator. The student had to answer the questions and simulate a reaction, with supplications and cries as the intensity increased, along with the electric shocks, which in reality did not occur. When then the instrument indicated 330 VAC, the student stopped all lamenting and simulated fainting. During the test, the investigator urged the teacher, "The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You do not have a choice. You must continue." The degree of obedience was measured according to the number of the last switch that the teacher closed before refusing to continue with the test. Only at the end of the experiment, the participants were informed that the victim had not suffered any kind of electric shock. Contrary to the expectations, despite the fact that the 40 people subjected to the experiment showed symptoms of tension and protested, a considerable percentage of them blindly obeyed the investigator. Although the weight of our conformist tendencies is undeniable, It is also true that human social relationships are much less stable than in other species. This is to a large extent a product of the occurrence in our psychoevolutionary history of the justice-injustice feeling. This feeling was also identified in other primates. For example, among Capuchin monkeys, as shown by a study carried out by Sarah Brosnan and Frans de Waal, one of the greatest living ethologists. In the experiment, the investigators recorded the reactions of several pairs of monkeys, facing a repeated series of right and wrong situations. In the first case, by carrying out a certain task correctly, both monkeys were rewarded with pieces of cucumber, a food that was moderately appreciated. In the second case, however, one monkey was rewarded with grapes, a delicacy, while the other monkey was given a less appreciated reward. As an additional check, the investigators then created a truly unjust scenario. One of the two monkeys received the grapes without having done anything. The result was that as the test continued, the monkeys rewarded with the lowest value prize reacted in a progressively negative way by throwing the unfair reward out of the cage or even refused to perform the task requested. Since the origin of people, many humans sought an otherworldly reward for the frustration of their aspirations for justice, and others were able to exploit these hopes. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, all describe in their own way places where just people will meet after death. Even if these cultural products gave rise to relatively stable communities, they often fueled the intolerance of oppressive aspirations and turned to war. The history of attempts to build socialist and communist egalitarian societies did not fare any better. The exterminations and famines they generated are proof of this. If we wish to achieve a social organization that removes conflicts and meets the innate need for justice that characterizes our species more than any other, we will have to choose between two possible scenarios. The first one consists of absolute equality, related to each and every one of our mental and physical aspects. A level of equality so extreme that to most people today, only imagining it would certainly be detestable. However, only by reaching such an absolute level of equality, we would be certain to have removed all possible sources of conflict in our relationships. In order to achieve this purpose, we must first leave behind any feeling of admiration and gratitude. In fact, admiring or being grateful to someone implies a relatively negative feeling towards those who consider themselves worthy of less approval or gratitude. Equality between individuals must concern every physical and mental aspect, because where there are no great differences, the small differences produce the same harmful effects of the large ones, if present. Even in a recently egalitarian society, perhaps sayings like, "the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence," would continue to make sense. The second method, in which we can clear conflicts and at the same time meet our aspirations for justice, is through the complete isolation of every human being. In many sectors of our modern human societies, it is possible to find evidence that suggests that this second scenario is the most likely to occur. Whether it is in the field of work, love, culture, or play, the need to interact directly with other people is increasingly reduced, and with it, the desire to meet. Instead, the use of remote methods of communication is growing, a change that may appear to be just formal, but if we take into account the evolutionary rhythm of the software that have human personalities as their model, it is easy to guess that we will soon reach, also in this manner, a wider concept of otherness, and therefore consider the less important fact that the interlocutor is or is not a real person. It is also likely that as computer programs develop, it will become much more useful and rewarding for human beings to interact with them rather than with their fellow human beings. Modern research has produced numerous associations between the artificial minds and robotic bodies, but despite the promising results of this field, we should take into account that there is another technology that can give a body to artificial intelligence, not by only using more modest material resources, but also with a pace of development that progresses with the same speed in which the programming of artificial minds develops. That is computer graphics associated with virtual reality. The association between artificial intelligence and bodies generated through digital graphics is one of the central aims of neuropsycho-art when it makes use of virtual reality. Technological research in the field of virtual reality and the so-called augmented reality, which consists of the introduction of virtual elements between normal perceptions, already produced devices capable of including tactile sensations and virtual experiences. It is easy to predict that the tools for the fruition of VR will gradually become more and more capable of reducing the distance between reality and virtuality until making them indistinguishable. These devices will also reduce their bulky nature and increase their comfort. And the day will come when it will be possible to use them while forgetting to make use of them. Such forgetfulness will mark the end of the discrimination between illusory and real experiences. If the end of every human conflict will be achieved through scientific progress and the complete isolation of every human being, the conflict originating from the mind will remain unresolved and unresolvable.
Alfredo Pacilio, Naples, November 16, 2016.